Okay guys, today we're going to talk about aspect ratios. You know what those are, right? You know, basically the size of a video frame and all of that. I think it'll be interesting. Alright, now that half the audience is left, let's get going. Now you might be wondering why on earth I'm even talking about this. Well, something bothered me a while back now. I saw a video advertising Donkey Kong Country Forever. The idea was that since most of the original Donkey Kong Country TV show uploads had the comments on each episode disabled, that they'd upload them to enable them again, while making a few additional modifications. Okay, doesn't seem too bad. But wait, why are the episodes in widescreen? Yeah, for those who are unaware, this show was never in widescreen. This was made in the 90s for crying out loud, and with free CGI software. No, you see, this was, to quote the channel description, an added plus. No, it isn't. Maybe I'm a bit stringent about this kind of thing, but doing something like this is usually bad. I think there are exceptions, but we'll get to those later. As a general rule, however, you don't go touching the aspect ratio of a given piece of media, especially for the sake of preserving the originals. And while I'd be upset about this person throwing these 480p videos into a 1080p frame, that's a much lesser deal, and honestly I think it's fine. It doesn't really add anything, but it's nothing bad. Now if they sharpen the entire picture to hell to make it look more HD, yeah, okay, then I'd have a problem with it. So what are aspect ratios? Well, put very simply, this is how a video is displayed within a given frame. We're going to go over a lot of stuff here, and you'll hopefully understand by the end why this example I showed bothered me so much. Let's go over the most basic aspect ratios and how they work. For starters, we have 4:3, which you likely associate with old TV or VHS, maybe even certain DVDs. This is that old format. Also, some people use it to make their footage look older or something like that. Next up, we have 1:1, which is a literal square aspect ratio, usually used by garbage websites. Now, I'm not naming names as to what those garbage websites might be, but they might or might not be something called Instagram. Luckily, this aspect ratio seems to be fading out, which is by no means a bad thing, since, yeah, I just kinda don't like it. 16:9 is the most standard widescreen aspect ratio, and by far the most common now. Most modern videos use this, especially anything remotely long form, many movies use this, most TV shows use this, and so on. Then we have 21:9, which is generally a more cinematic aspect ratio, generally used for movies that want to waste screen real estate on literally nothing. Okay, I know that isn't technically the reason, but I don't really understand 21:9 as an aspect ratio. I think it started to pick up steam among PC users in the mid-2010s before everyone started to realize it was dumb and no one cared. There wasn't and still isn't enough content to really justify its existence. I think if you're using it in filmmaking, then that's another thing entirely. There are a couple more, less common aspect ratios to talk about, so let's get through those real quick. 9:16 and 9:21 are the aspect ratios of films that use 16:9 and 21:9, but vertically. That's right, it's for those freaks who decide to film vertically. And if you're one of those people, I hate you. If you film vertically, you're quite possibly less than human, as a matter of fact. One other aspect ratio that's somewhat important, at least to certain people, is 8:7, which was the aspect ratio for NES games. There's been an argument for decades now over what the proper display resolution is for this, since 8:7 and 4:3 are subtly different. And while I believe that both are okay options, I think 4:3 should be picked. I mean, think about it for a minute here, at least from a design perspective. It's not like the game designers didn't know that 4:3 existed. In fact, the games were likely tested on 4:3 monitors, and this is what they expected people to play their games on. If anything, it could be argued that the intended way to play would be 4:3, as I don't think very many people had 8:7 screens back in those days. Now then, why did this example bother me so much when I first saw it? Well, to explain that, I have to explain 5 methods of putting 4x3 material in 16x9. The first method is the best and arguably most straightforward. Literally just put the 4x3 video in a 16x9 frame with borders on the side. While I always prefer just having the 4x3 video alone, this isn't a bad option. The second option is similar, but you put a blurred and stretched or zoomed in copy of the 4x3 video where the pillar boxes would be. While this is good, and was actually rather popular for a while in the 2010s for content creators, I think ultimately it's a little distracting, especially if there's any movement on the sides. But I can see the argument for it though. Third option we have is pan and scan. This involves panning the frame around depending on each shot to have everything needed for a scene at least somewhat in view. This may sound good at first, and is better than the next 2 options to a certain degree, but not only does it mess with an artistic vision for a certain shot, but things can also feel a bit cramped. Mind you, most people just doing this out of not knowing better generally don't even know about this, nor would they employ it. This was mainly done by movie studios for movies that had to be cropped down to fit a 4x3 aspect ratio screen, especially in the 2000s.
What's called pan and scan, where they lop off the sides.
Pan and scan is when they try to make a widescreen film, a rectangle, fit into a square format on a television screen.
And that is, in a sense, technically, redirecting the movie. The chariot sequence is one of the greatest action sequences ever done in movies. Ben-Hur is driving 4 horses. Very often you'll find that there'll only be 2 in the frame.
If a director chooses to tell a story for whatever reasons in this ratio, because they want all this information in, it's not fair for somebody else to tell you with our name on it that this is what we shot. I didn't shoot that.
The fourth option is stretching the video along the horizontal. This one's simple, as it just makes everything, well, stretched. It never looks good, but the one saving grace is that this can usually be reverted by someone who knows how to, with not much lost except a bit of time. The fifth and final option is chopping off the top and bottom of the video. And, of course, this is what the supposed best quality version does. Yeah, an added plus, right guys? Unlike the previous option, this can't ever be restored. The information at the top and bottom of the screen is just gone. That's it. Of course, luckily we have the actual originals here to compare to, but I still hate it when people do this. Just so we're clear, this option is bad. In fact, options 3, 4, and 5 are simply bad in general, and you shouldn't use them, especially not anymore. But the fifth one is arguably the worst. It's the laziest one, it doesn't even attempt to preserve anything like horizontal stretching accidentally manages to do, and say what you will about pan and scan, but at least one could theoretically argue that someone tried to keep the original vision intact. There's even more I could say about this, such as how even the original creators remastering into 16:9 isn't always the best option, but also sometimes even the original creators mess it up, generally for not knowing any better. While this is a rare problem for original creators to do now, it used to be somewhat common because I want it in widescreen. Widescreen is the way of the future, and I don't care how we make it happen. Now then, on to the exceptions. Artistic license. If you're not doing this for the sake of preservation or presentation, but rather for artistic purposes, like using it in a YTP, and you know what you're doing, or it otherwise makes it easier to edit with, by all means, go right ahead. Incorrect aspect ratio to begin with, or other clearly defined aspect ratios. Mind you, this shouldn't be used as a license to change whatever you want, but if you can clearly tell that a video has been crushed into a 4:3 aspect ratio or something like that, and you wish to fix it, go ahead and do so. If you encounter a video or something where the creator messed something up or had bounding boxes where they're no longer needed, go ahead and fix this.
Why?
Some old YouTube videos especially used to have a person film in 16:9, but edit in their editing software in 4:3, so there would be giant bounding boxes, and it's even more obvious now since our monitors are in 16:9 too. Also, some games used to do this where the game was in 4:3, but cutscenes would switch to 16:9. While that might be hard to fix on the fly, if you can do so in editing, I'd say go ahead. Now, was this video to tear into this one Donkey Kong Country YouTuber that likely didn't know any better? Well, I'd say no. I'm not sure that's entirely the case. I think I happened to find that person at just the wrong time to a point where it got stuck in my head enough to really bother me. It got so far that I decided to make this video, clearly. With that all being said, no hard feelings, Donkey Kong Country Forever. I'd probably be angrier if you had the only surviving copies of this 90s TV show, but that's clearly not the case. It's the thought that counts, you know. And if your channel description is anything to go by, you at least had some good intentions. I just hope everyone has learned something from this video, and that you don't go modifying 4:3 footage to such a degree in the future. Well, thank y'all for watching, and take care.
So I'm converting this to widescreen for the rest of the episode. Why?